Hello and welcome to a very new looking episode of FtLoC. We are obviously coming to you from outside of our studio. I'm coming from my own man cave here, Castle Grayskull as I call it, and my FtLoC friend is joining me from, well, what looks like a Bentley.
Hello. Yes. I should probably explain this fairly early on in the episode, really, shouldn't I?
I mean, it might be self-explanatory for anyone watching this anytime soon, but Henry Catchwell, please explain where you are and why you're there.
Well, fairly obviously, I am at home because hashtag stay at home and all that because of the coronavirus. And, well, just before everything went into lockdown, we were going to be shooting a film on the Bentley Continental, it was GTC, it's now just convertible V8 because we haven't tried one of those. We haven't tried V8, we haven't tried convertible. So, hey, it seemed a good thing to do to book in. And then everything went into lockdown, so we can't film it. But what it's meant is that I've been left with, so I didn't know what colour was turning up. It's a gold convertible Bentley, which nice. In these straitened times, in this sort of, these dark times where people are tightening their belts, etc., swanning around in a gold convertible Bentley is, I don't know.
Not right is it?
I might as well fill it up with loo roll, which there is a shortage of here in the UK, in case you're watching elsewhere in the world, and just drive around shouting, "Mine, all mine!" So, yeah, there we go. Anyway, it's a lovely thing to have around. Not that I can, it's just a very expensive sort of paperweight, basically, because I can't go anywhere. But at least it gives me somewhere nice and quiet to record this in anyway.
Quite. Obviously, we are in the midst of COVID-19, and in the UK especially, we're being very much encouraged to stay home, which we are very much doing. It also means that we're kind of stuck with the cars that we've been lent for the foreseeable future. And in Henry's case, that just happens to be a convertible Bentley. How on earth did you manage to secure that just in time? It's like you knew or something. Oh well, I'm still in proud possession of our Carfection long-termer, the Volvo XC60, and very handy that's been too. But we will come to the long-termers in a little bit. I think first it's possibly the most important thing to address what's going on with the channel and what's going to be happening in the next couple of weeks, because obviously everyone is in lockdown. We're not able to go out and film any new content on location as we're all staying at home, as is responsible to do. But that doesn't mean that we won't have a lot of interesting content coming to the channel. We've had a busy couple of months filming, haven't we, Henry?
We have, yes. It's been, a very, very busy start to the year, really. The big film, I suppose, that has just gone out is Defender, which we might as well talk about a bit, sort of, right over here, because lots of people.
Sorry, I just stood on my headphones and they popped out. I didn't hear what you just said.
I was just saying to everyone what a lovely person you are. So, I was talking about Defender,
yes.
because it's been obviously a big film for us, and we've had lots of lovely messages, both sort of on the channel and sort of elsewhere, saying what a cool film it was. Props to Charlie, who spent a long time, because it was a big old film, nearly half an hour in length. But yeah, that's gone down very well, and it was quite an epic adventure in the first place, and then quite an adventure trying to edit the whole thing together into what you eventually saw. So yes.
Yeah, that's an example of something that was shot pre-lockdown, of which we have a couple left in the can. The Defender film is something really special. I think it's definitely kind of in like the top 5 films that we've ever put out on the channel. There's a link in the description below. But most of you, I'm guessing by now, have probably seen it. It's been Namibia is a hell of a place to film. I've been lucky enough to have gone there twice now to film in the past for BMW and for Toyota. But it looks like you had the best of it. You saw a huge chunk of the country.
Yes, I mean, we sort of, in some ways we saw quite a small bit of it, but we did see still a huge chunk of countryside. It was amazing. I'd never been to Southern Africa before, and it was challenging, certainly in terms of filming, because of the way we filmed, in terms of with obviously in a convoy of other vehicles, which you saw some of in the film. And I think it was a case of we wanted to stop literally every 2 seconds basically to film another amazing view. But we did actually cover a huge amount of ground during the 3 days, so we had to just keep going a lot of the time. So it meant that Charlie and I tended to get up very early and go to bed very late, sort of in terms of trying to get extra footage to tie it all together. But it was just phenomenal, and it was one of those things. I think it got better every day as well, which was very strange when we were actually out there filming, because you thought, well, you would see amazing things one day, and then people go, oh no, you wait till tomorrow, and you just, how on earth can it get better than today, sort of thing. So yeah, it was phenomenal, and a proper test for the Defender as well, because that was what I was, I suppose, sort of not worried about, but I didn't want to go all the way to Africa and then poodle around doing something that you could have done at East Norcastle, where Land Rover hold their off-road activities, which is very tough. But what we had in terms of the 3 days was not just the specific off-road tests, like the Van Zil's Pass, which I'm sure I've been pronounced wrong. I think a couple of people have said I pronounced wrong, but or incorrectly. But
Van Zyl.
rock crawling there. Thank you very much. But the rock crawling, the wading, the sand, all that sort of thing. But it was just the sheer mileage we put on the cars, and sort of things like the corrugations on the roads, basically, that would put the car through a huge sort of amount of stress, basically, in terms of just the vibrations, etc. And it was, a proper test of the car, and the fact that there were no warning lights or sort of problems with the car whatsoever was very reassuring, because, well, as we know, JLR don't have a great reputation for sort of reliability, and the Defender has to be ultimately very, very reliable. So yeah, it was amazing to go there, but also really, really good and useful and reassuring as a test of the Defender.
Yeah, it is a fantastic place. We're very grateful that for JLR to have given us the opportunity to A, go out there, and B, to whatever gods of fate it was that allowed it to still happen before everything got shut down. So having the opportunity for you guys to go out there and film it and do such a cracking job with it, it was brilliant. And for us to be able to share that with everyone while everyone's locked up at home is massively brilliant. Encourage you all to check that out very, very soon. As I say, we do have quite a few films like that left in the can and a few ideas of our own, but I think what we really want to know is, what would you like to see from us? Obviously, under the restrictions that we all have on us now, we are limited to being able to film in or around our own homes, but we do have one of the largest archives of self-shot material of any channel out there, I think, and we certainly have a few things that we could put together. I want to do a retrospective on the BAC Mono. There's a film, Henry, you went up to see the new Mono with one of the Briggs brothers a couple of weeks ago. Was one of the films, we'll touch on Lack of Geneva a little bit later, but that was one of the films that you shot off the back of that. And to the untrained eye, it looks fairly similar, but there's actually quite significant changes to that. And that's a story that I've followed for the last 8 or 9 years, the BAC Mono. So quite like to go back through the archive and do a sum up of that. But we have an opportunity here to do some stuff that we've never done before. So I'm very interested to hear from you. And please leave it in the comments below, or find us on Twitter at Carfection, or on Instagram at Carfection Films, and give us some suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, discussions you'd like us to have. We might be having some old chestnut conversations like Ideal Garage, 3-car garage, that kind of thing. Some tentpoles of automotive journalism that I'm sure you'll be interested in hearing yet another conversation on. But what we're more interested in is your suggestions for things that we haven't done yet, or that you haven't seen anyone else do yet. In addition, we are considering doing more live recordings as well. We're trying to figure out the logistics around that, but would you be interested in joining us for a live conversation with Henry and myself, and perhaps 1 or 2 other people from the Carfection stable of freelance contributors, to have a live discussion with you and get you more involved in these troubling and uncertain times? Henry, do you have any plans for doing anything particular from home over the next couple of weeks?
Well, I was going to raid my my model car collection, perhaps, because I've got a few things up in the loft which I thought I might get down anyway, because I haven't seen them for a while, so they're still up there. And then I was going to perhaps do some suggestions of my personal favourite motoring related books to read, things like that. There was another on your Dream Garage idea. I thought I might sort of resuscitate the idea I had a while ago, which was the sort of the Dream Garage, but I called it something like Desert Island Drives, which is yes, taking inspiration from the Radio 4 Desert Island Discs program, and it was sort of like the Dream Garage, but just taking it a little bit further. So we might have a look at that at some point, maybe, because it's. I thought it was quite fun anyway, and in these times, why not? I've got some ideas as well for potentially. I know there are a few films in the back catalogue that there might be some onboard footage that people have asked to see, the sort of extended onboard footage, or we might be able to do some cool sort of purely sort of exhaust note only style videos, which I think would suit some cars very, very well indeed, and possibly have a look at some of the road trips we've been on, some roads to go to, some sort of dreams about what we might be able to do once all this is over. So yeah, I've got a few thoughts of that, but yes, any other films that we've done in the past that you'd like to know behind the scenes of what went into it, perhaps, or maybe if you've got questions for Charlie in terms of how he shot certain things, then we can certainly do some films on that as well. But yes, as you say, we have still got some really good films that we shot before the lockdown, which is actually this has given us a chance to catch up, I suppose, and actually get a lot of that stuff edited, and gives us the time to do it justice, which is quite nice. The sort of the advantage of this being a small team and not always having a chance to be on top of all the edits means that we've got some cool stuff in the bag still to come out.
Yeah, we're basically trying to deputize each and every one of you into being associate producers on Carfection and help us come up with some ideas. I know a lot of you are also quite interested in the logistics and actually getting into an industry like this. I think that's something that Henry and I can potentially shed some light on for you as well, in a few pieces of content where we've all had different paths that have led us to these jobs that we do now. And I don't mind admitting they are very desirable jobs to have, even in difficult, challenging times like this. So a few pieces on that might be quite nice. In terms of stuff that we've had, there's some great stuff still coming to the channel that we haven't finished editing yet that you will absolutely want to stay subscribed for. And obviously, if you're watching this, you've seen it's a FtLoC. You are amongst our biggest fans, and we absolutely appreciate every last bit of attention that you give to our channel, especially during these times, and encourage you to stay completely engaged with us everywhere. We're trying to do up the Facebook page again, trying to do more with that, and we're, as always, very engaged on Twitter and Instagram. I gave you those handles already. I really can't wait to share with you the Finland film that I shot up a couple of months ago. That was a fantastic shoot, and it's very close to being done. That's very, very exciting. But we've had a lot of really, really great stuff on the channel just recently. We've been talking about the Defender film, but one of the most recent films that we got up on the channel was another absolute gem, was on the M3 CSL with the manual conversion. Henry, tell us a bit more about that. Yes,
so this was a car that a chap called David Chapman got in touch with me, in fact, through, I can't remember if it was Twitter or Instagram, saying, would you like to drive it? And the M3 CSL, well, when we did our Greatest M3s series, it brought home again just how almost perfect the E46 M3 CSL is, but that SMG automated manual isn't just, it is just frustrating, I think. And so they have converted it to a manual gearbox, which is, well, as you watch the film, you'll see how easy or otherwise it is. But they've also done something else which is very interesting, because it's not just the manual conversion. They've also shortened the final drive on it. So that really brings the car even more alive, just gives you more access to the sort of the way the engine revs and that top end when you're on the road. So it's just fantastic, I think.
It's quite interesting, because it opens up a bigger conversation around BMW and M in particular, in how you kind of consider that to be the most considerate of the enthusiast driver. Like it's not a car just bought for someone who's just interested in the badge. They're really focusing in on someone who really loves the driving experience of a BMW, and then only to have ever delivered it with that SMG. and not with a manual gearbox. There's a lot of discussion that was going on. We did it as a live premiere, so we were live chatting to people coming through. And there's almost, from a couple of people, some incredulity that it wasn't available as a manual in the first place. And kind of secondly, that this might actually have been what they should have only had. So it is an interesting conversation that comes out of that, whether or not BMW and their peers make mistakes in terms of what they think people will actually need. And that can't always just be from a purchasing point of view, especially when you're talking with the cars focused in on driving experience as the CSL. It's
interesting, isn't it? Because BMW, obviously, they then did the E90, did E90 M3, but E60 M5, which wasn't available initially with a manual gearbox. They then did a manual gearbox for the American market only. And it's a sort of strange time, I suppose, because I think at the time of the SMG, or SMG2 as it was in the CSL, there was a feeling that, yes, this is the way forward. All cars were going to be paddle shift. It was demonstrably better in all the sort of measurable ways. And so a lot of engineers were thinking, no, this is it. We're going to get rid of the manual gearbox in the way that subsequently pretty much across the board they've got rid of hydraulically assisted power steering. But there was such a kickback. We obviously saw it with Porsche as well. They tried to get rid of it in the GT3, then they brought it back, hence us doing the manuals matter film and all that sort of thing. And it is one of these things that I think the manual gearbox just won't go away. It is such an integral part of the car, and it's nice that BMW does still offer manuals on most of its cars these days as well. Sort of obviously things like the M2 competition you can get with a manual gearbox and stuff. So yeah, it feels like the manual has fought pretty hard for its existence and has survived. Really, it's rare, but it has survived. Aston's another one. They've obviously done a manual version of the Vantage.
Yeah, I mean, it is that kind of swing there and back between do they or don't they. And with Porsche, when they develop something as good as the PDK gearbox, which is demonstrably better at everything a human being can do, you can understand engineers for going, well, better is better. Whereas as consumers, we're like, no, better isn't better. It's a confusing message to send back to manufacturers. But this film, it definitely is a great kickoff point for that conversation. Definitely encourage you to watch it. There's a link in the description below. But quickly wanted to touch on another two films that came to the channel fairly recently, which were two of the batch that you guys shot over in the US last year when you went on that road trip through California. In particular, one Dodge and one Porsche as reimagined by Singer. I have to be very careful on how I refer to that brand.
Yes, let's talk about the Porsche reimagined by Singer first. That was a film we wanted to get out there for ages. It was shot in just in one day, and it looks lovely because you've got that lovely golden California light, and the car was one of those ones I was really intrigued to drive it because I've heard so much good stuff about the cars, and I wanted to know, was it sort of just, could it be as good as all the hype really? And it was absolutely fantastic. The one we had the latest 4-litre engine, which I thought probably was almost, I know they've been tweaking with the sort of the mapping of it. In a way, I felt like it could probably do with an even more sort of just, it was almost too smooth, too linear. They'd almost gone too far. I suppose a bit like what we were saying before with kind of sort of PDK versus manual. You can over-engineer something almost so that it's better by the numbers, but not perhaps it loses some of the ultimate character. I'm nitpicking, but the rest of the car, it was absolutely brilliant. And I love the fact that, and you see this actually in the people that own one of their cars, they do tend to use them. There are lots of pictures, you follow on Instagram and stuff, people are out there, they're using them a lot. They're perhaps not daily driving them, although I think some people probably do, and you can see that straight away. The ride is really nice and compliant. It's got that lovely thing of breathing with the road, and it doesn't feel like a classic in terms of this sort of fragility and the fact you wouldn't want to go on a long journey and or something like that. And that was something that really impressed me, which is why when I sort of got to the end of the film, which you'll see the conclusion, etc., is sort of trying to think of this one car garage and something that covers all bases. It potentially is that car. I'm not saying it's sort of, yes, you can choose all sorts of other things, almost in a way. I'm not sure, perhaps it would be, if you could only choose 3 cars, perhaps it wouldn't be one of those 3 cars. That sounds odd.
Good.
But, well, perhaps because you might have another 911 that's even rawer or something like that. So maybe the, I don't know, Workshop 5001 car or something like that you wouldn't use every day at all, but had, sort of, it has no air con, and, the gearbox takes a bit more getting used to, and all these sorts of things. Perhaps you'd have that as part of a 3-car garage where you then had an RS6 as your everyday car or something like that. But if you could only have one, then I think the 911 reimagined by Singer is the kind of a complete package, really. It is absolutely amazing.
Okay, so from one very delicately crafted automotive piece of art to something a little less subtle, you went and drove a Dodge.
Yes, which I didn't know what to expect from that at all. I never like to prejudge cars anyway, and I loved it way more than I thought I was going to. The engine it sounds like a Banshee. It sounds like a sort of, I suppose, an aerial atom, one of the supercharged aerial atoms, but on steroids. And the nice thing is that it has 800 brake horsepower, so that's plenty, and it just marmalises its rear tyres in an instant, so that's fun in itself. But it doesn't try to be something like the GT350 Mustang, which feels like it's really trying to take on a 911 GT3 or something like that. It's really tight and focused and wants to be a track car. This, it feels like a big armchair of a car. It's kind of almost got some of the sort of Bentley about it, but just with this ludicrous engine in it. And that was really nice because it's quite old school in the way that it rolls and sort of pitches and squats, but then it was also still really controllable as well. So yeah, loved it. Really, really loved it. I could definitely see a place for one of those in a garage, because again, it's totally different.
It strikes me as one of the most American cars you can get. Just huge power, but then we still want it to be comfortable and soft as well. Like there's no compromise from that point of view. It's just all of everything. Now, I must say, I've never been a huge fan of a supercharger wine. In the supercharged aerial atom is the only exception because it feels like it suits that car. But the supercharger always feels like it's a completely alien sound inside of a car engine. So compared to what a V8 sounds like, compared to a supercharger wine, those things feel like we live in different universes, and throwing them both together kind of does my head in. I did, in an atom, it did feel right. Because it sounds like someone in the passenger seat is screaming. If one drives by you with it on full whack, it sounds like there's a terrified passenger, and I always love that about it. But you can definitely...
Yes, of course, with Atoms now, of course, they've always done this sort of almost over-the-top soundtrack, haven't they? Because you had the supercharged group, and now you've got, in the latest turbocharged version, you've got a proper sort of chuff and whistle sort of from the turbocharger in it, which is brilliant as well.
Yeah, and well, have a listen to it in the video. You can very much hear the supercharger. Let us know what you think of supercharger noises. The one thing that we can all agree with is that you can hear it. It is very, very audible. Now, one of the consequences of the craziness that is 2020 is that all car shows have been cancelled. For the rest, we had a nice couple of weeks' notice, except for Geneva, where we had the sum total of 3 days' notice that the show was getting cancelled. So much so that, in fact, Henry and Charlie were already on their way down there and did end up going. The benefit of which is that we do have a few films that no one else was able to get, or very few people were able to get from the show. In particular, the most noteworthy is the new 911 Turbo S, which was meant to make its debut at the Geneva Auto Show, but you guys were able to go and actually see it at Porsche itself.
Yes. So we sort of managed to divert via Stuttgart and said, could we come and see the car and do a film on it? And they said yes, which is all very good. So we hung around in Stuttgart for a morning, went to the Porsche Museum, because that's always quite a fun thing to go and do. So we had a wander around there, and then went across to Weissach and went in fact into the design studio. So which is kind of cool in itself, because it's the place where all the new product goes into first. It's where the board members come down and sort of give it the old thumbs up or thumbs down. It's a really cool place as well. Charlie got quite excited about it, because they had some massive screens which he was really sort of lushing over, and then they've also got this roof which is like a big sort of softbox in a way, in terms of they can mimic different kinds of light around the world. So it could be completely dark, or you could have indoor studio lighting, or you could make it like that lovely California light from the Singer film that we did. And then the car itself, it kind of looks what you'd expect a 911 Turbo to look like. There weren't actually big surprises, I suppose, which is probably a good and a bad thing, I suppose, in terms of how much you want things to move on. It's the interesting thing is it's this new engine, so they're making this engine work pretty hard, because it's the engine based off the 992 3-litre turbocharged engine, but it's now to 3.8 litres. But that's also the engine that is the basis for the GTS engine, and the obviously Spider and GT4 engine, which is up to 4 litres and naturally aspirated. So they are getting their money's worth from that. And it's all the sort of figures you'd expect. I think the thing I like about the Turbo, or Turbo S in this case, is that it is still pretty understated. You know, a lot of people would walk past it and still, yes, it's got a small rear wing on the back, but most people would probably walk past it and think, well, it's just another 911. It's not got that supercar look to it, like a McLaren or a Ferrari, or even a GT2 RS for that matter. So it does sort of go unnoticed, but it has this otherworldly performance to it. All the previous ones have. We haven't driven this one yet, which means that it's almost, I've sort of described it in the past as being like the safest car in the world in a way, because you've got so much performance. The braking is way better than you should ever need on the road. The acceleration, if you're ever going to go for a gap or go for an overtake or whatever, is way more than you ever need. So you've got this sort of superhero of a car in its Clark Kent guise, really.
It's a very interesting walk around, whether or not it's, we've seen the generation of 911 it's based on for a while, so yeah, as you say, it's not a huge surprise looks wise, but it's just nice to see that the Turbo lives on, even in these confusing times of everything being turbocharged pretty much at Porsche. So the Turbo itself doesn't mean as much as it used to. That aside, it's a very interesting film, and is added to the raft of films which are our non-Geneva films, which also include my walk around of the Morgan Plus 4, now spelt FOUR instead of the number 4, that being the biggest difference to the visuals, but underneath it's a completely new car, I do guarantee. Henry and Charlie, you were able to go and see the new version of the Chiron, the Pure Sport, I believe that's called.
Yes.
Yes. In Molsheim. Also very much worth checking out. Just checking my notes. We also had the previews in studios. We were able to shoot the Aston Martin V12 Speedster, the Bentley Bacalar, the McLaren 765 LT. I had a brain freeze on the numbers there. I looked over it and I hadn't written it down as well, so I was still going to have to retrieve it from memory. 765 LT. I love McLaren. I really don't like their naming convention. Well, they're based on PS, which I find annoying, but then also it's fairly random numbers. Like, they're not nice round numbers. Anyhow, they are all worth checking out, and they are the last time we're going to see new cars unveiled like that for a wee while. They will come back eventually. But suffice to say that those are the substitute that you have for us not having attended the Geneva Motor Show. And there's a further update to all the cars that got unveiled that we weren't able to see, but still, so you have all that information in one tightly compressed place. There is a link in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to this on the podcast, hello, message me on Twitter and I'll send you a personalized link. Yes, so we're going to keep FtLoC going as a podcast and as a video up on YouTube, but we're going to streamline it, make it a little bit shorter, more bite-sized for you to enjoy. As we said earlier in the episode, please give us any suggestions for topics you'd like us to tackle in the show. And if you are listening to this on the podcast, get in touch with us on Twitter. Let us know you're listening on the podcast. We're trying to figure out how to make this most useful for everyone just listening on audio. Obviously, these are challenging times and we are going to get through it all together. We're going to make some fantastic content and see this out. But in the meantime, the most important thing, obviously, is that you and your loved ones all keep safe during these difficult times. And we will as well. So by the time we get out of this, we can have a big celebration and the mother of all road trips. Henry, does that sound like a good idea to you?
That sounds like an excellent idea to me.
Fantastic. Well, for now, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
And we'll see you next time.